Okay, let's get started. I'm Frances Stewart. I'm the chair of the Education Committee for Elders Climate Action, and we're delighted to have you all here with us tonight for this Electrify Your Life workshop. I think it literally will be electrifying. To get started, if you would all please, in the chat, add your name and your location so we can see everyone who's here. People can start to get to know each other. We're very excited about this workshop tonight. To electrify our lives. That's something that's really very, very important at this point. We really have a few years to make a huge difference in the climate crisis. And to do that, we need to move off of fossil fuels. And the best way to do that, maybe the only way to do that, is to move all kinds of things that we have done with fossil fuels in the past onto clean, renewable energy. And an essential step in doing that is making those parts of our life electric so that they can be powered by renewable energy. It doesn't matter how much renewable energy we have if we're using fossil fuels to do all sorts of other things. So very important, but not just something that's important for the world, for future generations and so forth. This is something that can, for each and every one of us, help to save us money, to make our homes more comfortable, to improve our lives in various ways. There's a lot to be learned about this. So we're very glad to have you here tonight. We have two great speakers to help us with this. We're going to start with Elders Climate Action member, Robert Whitehair, who's been doing great work on electrification and has made all this possible. So Robert, please take over.
Well, thank you, Frances, for the nice introduction, and thank you for the great summary of what we're facing and the solutions we have before us. I'm going to share my screen. That might take a second. And if I know how to do this. Thank you everyone again for attending this important webinar. This webinar is the electrification journey, as we like to call it, giving every opportunity to electrify your home and your ride. Electrification is the one most immediate, personal, direct way for you to have a positive impact on the climate crisis. It is regeneration, an inclusive and effective strategy addressing the way we live to bring Earth back to its full vitality. Before moving on, let's thank the team of Leslie Wharton, Frances Stewart, Jen Chandler, Seth Evans, Ariana Jenna, Roger Luckman, Todd Weber, Mike Allen, and Peter Marsh, who are working on this electrification journey both tonight and into the future as we offer other workshops in the future. Some of us have already electrified. We were fortunate enough to remove our gas meter, and we have on June 7th of this year, and we have not had gas used in our home for about almost 2 years. And we also take advantage of solar power. Let me set the context real quickly for you so that we have a beginning place. Frances has already done a great job of that. We're going to start with setting a little bit of the context, which I will do. The crisis is real, but it's not a cause for doom and gloom, but for solutions. Brian Stewart will spend the bulk of his time showing you some of the key points of electrification and all the things that you can do and how you can fund it. We will conduct 2 polls, one about where you've already done, and another about what you'd like to see provided by ECA. We will form about somewhere around an hour from now, we'll form into breakout sessions to give you a chance to talk, and then we'll have another poll. And most importantly, we will frame our future we will frame our future webinars on electrification based on what we hear from you today. Not only is Brian going to give you some great information about what you can do in your home, we also are going to gather information from you about what you would like to see. And also just to remind you, you will receive a copy of this presentation and some other information by email in a few days. This is absolutely a great time to be alive, with exciting opportunities to take personal action to practice regeneration in the way we buy and use electricity. The stars on the map are places where great things have been happening. If you look in the middle of the country, in the heartland states, Kansas has been connecting more of its windmills. There's a lot of wind in Kansas, where my family comes from, and those are being connected to the grid to increase the power of the grid. Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon have been passing legislation to require electrification in new construction, and in a few places to retrofit your home when you do a remodel. That's a small effort right now, but we're hoping that we can do more of that, and hopefully with your help. All over the country then, cities, counties, and states are adopting those new building codes. And I mentioned Washington, New York, California, Colorado, and even Florida, Texas, Hawaii, and other states are doing all they can to protect rooftop solar. And bluntly, we kind of have to say we're falling a little bit behind in California. We're getting to the point, though, where we're going to be able to do that. And if you look at this map, this is a map of roughly where all the people are who are on this seminar. You're from all over the country. You're doing wonderful things. You're doing great work to help electrify. I suspect the people here tonight, some of you have probably already maybe finished electrifying. Some of you are thinking about it. And some of you are looking for that last little push to get you motivated and moving. We've got plenty to tell you tonight. I like this slide because it shows all the faces of all the people around the country who are working on electrification. Some of you, I'm guessing, are probably on this slide. The upper left-hand corner is Orange County, California, one of the more conservative parts of the country, where last election cycle, they threw out 2 boards of supervisor members who had been holding up electrification, and they passed a new electrification law. In the middle is Howard County, Maryland. Down in the bottom, you see something for Montgomery County, Maryland, and also Annapolis, Maryland, where some of the folks on the call are from. You see our little group in San Mateo on the far left side. There's a group in the middle there who are electrifying buses all over the East Coast. And down in the lower right-hand corner in Brian's territory is Oregon and Washington, which are doing just fabulous work in getting their area rid of fossil fuels. I want to set the context that because alarmingly over the last 40 years, things have happened that where I don't think I got to move this out of the way. We went along as a world for about 1,000 years where the temperature of the planet was relatively flat. And if you see on the chart there, sometime around 1900, it started cycling up pretty rapidly. And then recently, it's cycled way up. And this is the hockey stick that was developed by Michael Mann in a book in 1999. And some people look at this chart and they say, well, this is great. We know where we are. But you look at the right-hand side of the chart, you could start to get into doom and gloom. You could start to think there's no solution. You could start to think that maybe inaction is the right way to go. Well, Michael Mann recently wrote a new book. He didn't invent the term hockey stick, but he brought it to the most attention to it. Even though some find it reason for inaction, all is not lost, not even close. In his most recent book, Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis, Mann says this: we can avoid catastrophic climate impacts if we take meaningful action now to address the climate crisis. I have another quote, which I'm going to read directly from Rebecca Solnit, activist writer on hope, disaster, feminism, and indigenous history. Also, recently the author and mother of all questions. She gives us this thought, which is the basis of our seminar today. Our goal is to offer realistic views, perspectives, voices, connections to people, as well as good paths forward for the climate and for those who care about it. One of the things we'll do today in the upcoming seminar and to upcoming seminars is to highlight solutions for everyone. And we'll talk more about that. We will provide electrification examples, equipment and appliance options, and more importantly, some ideas about how you can pay what is probably the most immediate, direct action you can take to respond to the climate crisis. Now I have the distinct privilege and honor to introduce Brian Stewart. Brian Stewart was the Vice President of Sustainability for Nike Corporation. When he retired, he and his wife formed a nonprofit called Electrify Now. For me, it is the go-to source to find out information about electrification. And Brian does seminars all over the country by Zoom and by others. He meets with manufacturers and talks about the supply chain. He just has a great sense of what to do next for electrification. We are very fortunate to have him here tonight. I've seen Brian in work, and he's just a generous person. One thing I want to add too is that we decided not to reinvent the wheel when it comes to manuals and how-tos and all the possibilities. Take advantage of the good people that are out there. And that's why we're taking advantage of Brian. So Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you for the rest of the seminar, and then I'll be back in about 40 minutes and we'll have a breakout session. Brian, over to you.
Great, thank you. Let's see, okay, let me share my screen here. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in this evening from all over the country. It's great to see that smattering of people from lots of different places. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you all for the introduction. Yeah, I love talking about this because it's a very optimistic message, you know, in the face of something that a lot of us have a lot of anxiety about. And I sometimes pinch myself because it feels like it's too good to be true to be able to say with a straight face that these things we're going to talk about today make your home healthier and more comfortable. They lower your energy bills and they lower carbon emissions. It almost feels like too good to be true. But I've been doing this long enough now and studying and trying to look at it from different angles, and I'm convinced this is true. But I also am very aware of the anxieties and hurdles that people might have about how to do this in their own homes. And so that's really what today is all about. I like to start right at the beginning by talking about a couple of concepts that are sort of laced into this message that we're going to be in discussion we're going to be having tonight. I mean, a lot of us, I think, might have the anxiety that individual action can feel like a small effort in the face of such a large problem as climate change. And I think part of that is true in some ways because we're just one person or whatever in this big system that is the world around us. But I think the thing that I've really started to realize is that individual actions can have lots of different impacts, and they have different scales of impact. And when you kind of intersect this idea of individual action and systems change, things get clearer about what it is that really makes a difference. And what I mean by that is, let's take two examples. Like, I think a lot of us that grew up with the environmental movement have been hearing things like turning down our thermostats and that sort of thing for a long time. And those are good actions that use less energy. They have beneficial effects, but they're very limited in their impact because they don't change the systems that are creating the problem. And I think one of the things that the fossil fuels companies have been really good at is deflecting blame away from the system that they operate towards us as individuals. And really, we need to be thinking about the systems that are the problem, and then how do our individual actions help to change those systems, to transform them into something that's new and better and sustainable. And I think what you'll see tonight is these things we're going to be talking about are incredibly powerful in terms of their ability to transform our systems. And in fact, they're essential. So keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that later. But okay, let's talk about the system that's the problem. I mean, for a while, I felt like there wasn't good clarity about this simple fact that the fossil fuels energy system is the problem. I mean, of course, there are other things that we have to get our arms around, like land use and materials waste and recycling, etc. But if it weren't for the fossil fuels burning problem that we have, we wouldn't be here tonight talking about this. Those other problems pale in comparison. The fossil fuels that's burned for electricity and for transportation and heat adds up to over 80% of the emissions in this country. It's very similar everywhere in the world. I've looked at the data from every country. It will vary by a few percentage points here and there, but for the most part, these three things are the culprits. And it's because we burn fossil fuels for these things that we need. And we're not going to suddenly stop needing electricity or stop needing transportation or stop needing heat. I like to spend a little bit extra attention on the heat side because although people kind of, I think, have a pretty innate or instinctual understanding that gas plants and coal plants that belch, you know, all that stuff into the air can't be good. In our cars, you can smell the problem and you can see the problem on our busy highways, etc. But the pollution that comes from burning natural gas is nearly invisible. And I'm talking about two forms of pollution: the carbon pollution, which is about 30% of our total emissions, but also the air pollution, which is a major source of ozone forming and particulates that are choking our cities in places like California. It's becoming one of the leading causes of air pollution as they are starting to get their hands around the transportation problem. And then I think the other reason why I love to spend a little bit extra time on this is the gas companies have just been so good at misinformation and marketing to make us feel good about this clean blue flame, the bridge fuel, all this kind of nonsense that makes their product feel less harmful than it really is. And now they're talking about things like renewable natural gas and blending hydrogen into their pipes to make us complacent, to make us feel like we don't need to change away from these dangerous fuels that pollute our air, pollute our homes, cause cancer and all sorts of other problems with the emissions that come from them, and are one of the leading causes of the climate problem. So I just like to spend a little extra time. I feel like I need to, in the face of this millions of dollars of advertising that the fossil gas industry uses to convince us otherwise. So that's the bad news. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. And I want to emphasize that point, stop. I mean, a lot of us have grown up with this idea of using less of things, which is great. But our mindset here has to be about no fossil fuels. That's the goal. The good news is, for the first time in history, really, in the last 5 years, we've seen this crossover where the cost of generating energy with wind and solar is now lower than it is to produce the same energy with gas or coal or nuclear or any of our other more traditional energy supply. And the projection is that these costs will go further as solar panels, which are being produced by the millions now, and wind turbines also produced in high quantities. As soon as we start making those things in large quantities, the cost of them goes down. So it's projected that solar panels and wind turbines will get cheaper as we continue to make more and more of them, which is really good news. The other thing that's been happening that's a little bit quiet and behind the scenes, but I think when I show these numbers, it'll make sense to you, is that electric appliances now are just dramatically more energy efficient than they were years ago. And this is some data from the US government about minimum efficiency standards. So the government mandates that furnaces deliver a certain minimum level of efficiency. And in the last 30 years, they've increased the minimum level of efficiency for gas furnaces and gas water heaters by 2%, which is, it's kind of a joke, really. It sort of means no change. It means that the gas water heaters that we buy today are essentially the exact same as ones we would have bought 30 years ago or more. On the other hand, electric devices like heat pumps, air conditioners, refrigerators, heat pump water heaters, which we'll talk about, are unbelievably more energy efficient than they were 30 years ago, partly because of this relentless innovation around heat pumps. And also the government recognizes that we need to reinforce that. So they keep jacking up the minimum efficiency standards for these products, which forces the manufacturers to up their game. This has not been happening in the gas industry, partly because of the unbelievable lobbying muscle that industry has, but also because the technology itself is not capable of dramatic improvements in technology, where in efficiency, whereas we have lots of places to get, we can get even better than what we're doing now in terms of electric devices. So it's exciting to see these new products that many of us are not that familiar with, like heat pumps maybe, but refrigerators that are literally like 3 times more energy efficient than the one that you bought 20 years ago or so. That's partly why when you look at our grid here in the United States and you look at that top yellow line there, which is the amount of electricity we consume in this country every year, over the last 20 years, it's remained roughly flat. Even though we have more people in the country, we have more devices that we're connecting to the grid. Because those devices get more and more efficient all the time, it means that we've had not a lot of extra energy demand needed. And the white line shows the emissions from electricity from our grid, which are going down dramatically and continuing to go down even more sharply as more and more renewable energy gets added to the grid. All right, so when you add all those things up, we have to get off fossil fuels. Electric devices are incredibly efficient. Renewable energy is cheap and abundant and available almost everywhere on the planet. You come to this conclusion that we should be electrifying everything, and I'm sure you're hearing that terminology. And that's really describing a sustainable future where the wind and the sun is powering all of our primary energy needs for the electricity we consume, translating that electricity into transportation and also into heating and, of course, cooling. This comes with these side benefits, which are almost too good to be true. You know, a lot of us are entering this conversation from the standpoint of carbon and our anxieties about climate change. But when we do these things, there is incredible energy cost savings, which we'll talk about. We get cleaner air. Think about that for a minute. Where does carbon or air pollution come from? For the most part, it comes from the same places where carbon pollution comes from, burning fossil fuels. So when you stop doing that, our cities suddenly get clean air, which very few of us even experience anymore on a regular basis. We'll have more available clean water. Somewhere between 10 and 40% of available fresh water in this country is used for processing fossil fuels. In Texas, it's 40%. Just to give you a reference point, the domestic water that you and I use for drinking in our homes and even for watering our lawns, if we still do that, that's less than 2% of the available fresh water. So suddenly we have this abundance of a resource that is incredibly in demand by getting off of fossil fuels. And of course, all this leads to healthier people, less exposure to all these dangerous chemicals, et cetera. And all that means lower healthcare costs, et cetera, and helps boost the economy. So it's almost a little bit, like I said, too good to be true, but it is true. And that's why this is so exciting. Let's bring it back to more of like a household level for a minute, and you can ponder your own home here. But in general, a home in the United States will create a household. 60% of the carbon emissions that come from a household come from the fossil fuels that we purchase for energy. So think of it as your electric bill, the gasoline you purchase for your car, your natural gas bill if you have that, or propane if you have that, or fuel oil if you're still buying that. There are a few people still do that. So 60% of our household responsibility in terms of emission comes from energy. The rest of it's from food and from things we purchase. And all of you, I'm sure, have tried to purchase fewer things and maybe buy locally and buy organic. You can chip away at those other things. But this 60%, this energy emissions, it's entirely possible to eliminate that entirely. We've done it in our home. I know Robert's done it in his home, and I'm sure some of you on this call have also done this. But the big culprits are the electricity we consume, which on average in the United States produces about 3 to 6 tons of carbon emissions per household for that electricity we purchase. And if you have trouble getting your brain around what 3 to 6 tons means, just think of it as roughly equivalent to the carbon pollution from an automobile, which is more like 4 to 8. And of course, that will vary. If you have a nice small little car, it'll be more like 4. But if you've got a big truck, it's going to be more like 8, or it can even be more than that. It can be 10. But that's the average in that 4 to 8 range. A gas furnace is surprisingly close in terms of its carbon pollution. And a gas water heater may be the smallest one of the 4 here, but still giant compared to anything else in our lives. Nothing else we have, other than maybe air travel, if you travel a lot, would compare to these numbers. Everything else is tiny. So these are the 4 big ones. But let's compare this to what happens in a home that's using renewable energy and has electrified these things. 0 tons for your electricity. You use that electricity to charge your car. 0 for your transportation. Use it to heat and cool your home. 0. And use it to heat your water. 0. So now, instead of 15 to 30, which is the range of typical homes in the United States for energy-related emissions, even if you just, let's take a half step. First, you just electrify. You didn't change the grid at all. No electricity, no renewable energy, just electrify. You would cut your emissions in half, literally. And you would, roughly speaking, cut your energy expenses in half. This is how much you would pay in energy bills every year. You know, it's over $3,000 savings. That's really typical all over the country. I've done this in Florida, Minnesota, all different states. It's a similar picture to this. And these are the national average numbers. And then, of course, if you're getting renewable energy in your home, which you can do today, we'll talk about how you can do that. Now you've gone from 15 to 30 to 0, and your home will never create carbon emissions again. And this is a permanent thing. It's not like putting on a sweater and turning the thermostat down, which you have to remember to do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. This is something you do once, and then forever, your home will never create any more carbon emissions, which is a lovely thing to contemplate. Okay, and That's just one home. There are 125 million households in the United States. Imagine if even a fraction of them do this, you see huge savings. But if all of them did this, we would collectively be saving $300 billion per year, every year, in our energy savings. $300 billion. This is not small money. 2 billion tons of carbon emissions avoided by these actions. So again, this is one of the reasons why, although there's some people who would just love to see fossil fuels stay the way they are, maybe are afraid of change. This is why change should not be scary. It should be attractive to us, because getting there can be painful, but once we're there, it's a beautiful place to be. And all of us can be part of that transition. So we're going to talk about this more in detail. This is how we organize it on our website, and we're going to come back to this in a minute about how you get clean electricity into your home, and then how you electrify your home and your transportation. We'll talk a little bit about how important it is to bring everyone along with us. But right now, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to do a little poll here, because I'm sure many of you have done some of these things in your own home, and we'd love to just learn more about that from you. So please take a minute and answer these questions here, and then we'll just report back out on how many people have done some of these things. Wow, this is great. Wow, I'm surprised by the heat pump water heater one, because that one is the one that feels like still a mystery to a lot of people, but that's fantastic. Great. Well, this is good. I mean, I hoped that, and maybe we can just ask you if any of you have done those things and you've had good experiences with them. We'd love to hear from you about what those are. You might put that in the chat. But hopefully those of you who are thinking about doing these things today will give you some reinforcement for taking those actions. So this is how we're going to structure, and this is what you would see if you went to our website. This is the way we organize things. And we'll start on, and we're going to go kind of quickly over this, because there's obviously, we could talk a lot about these things, but I want to at least give you an overview of these things we can do. So cleaning up our electric supply is one of the most important things. I'm excited to see that 23 states now have 100% renewable electricity laws. This means that it's a requirement that their states acquire 100% clean energy. And usually the time frame is somewhere between, I think the fastest is 2030, but most of them are more in the 2040 to 2050 zone. But they have, many of them have interim steps where we'll get a much cleaner grid by 2030. And this collectively covers 53% of the US population, because these 23 states tend to be the ones with the biggest population centers. So that's encouraging. And in a lot of ways, this is what's leading the clean energy transition in the country. So it's nice to know that even if we don't do anything, we're going to get clean energy. And think about it this way too. If you look at 2040, for example, which is 18 years from now, some of the things, or 2030, where we're going to get to 80% clean energy, most of the things you buy today, by that time, are going to be operating on nearly 100% renewable energy, whether you did anything or not. But we don't have to wait. We can get clean energy today and avoid 3 to 6 tons of emissions per year by doing one or all of these solutions. You can get green power plants from pretty much every utility in the country now. It's a good thing to do. It's not as powerful as rooftop solar, for example, which is fantastic because you're adding new generation to the grid. But rooftop doesn't work for everyone. Some people may live in a home that doesn't have good exposure, or maybe they're renting their home, or maybe they're not sure they're going to be there long enough to pay it off. So although I'm a huge fan of rooftop and there's lots of incentives for it, it doesn't work for everyone. Community solar is one of the unbelievable products that are available in almost 14 states now. 14 states, and California is soon to be available. And with these programs, you typically get a cost savings of 5% on your electric bill. But what's happening in this situation is your utility is being required to purchase energy on your behalf, however much you use every year, from a local solar farm that's built by an independent installer. And they're required by law to hook up to these solar farms and use energy from there. And your subscription is what makes it possible for these solar installers, these small scale utility solar farms to get the funding to be built. So you have a huge role when you subscribe to these programs in adding new clean energy generation to the grid. So, and you get a little bit of a break on your electricity, which is fantastic. There's lots of information on my website about this. It's easy to do. There's no penalties if you decide you don't like it, etc. So it's kind of like a fail-safe option that more people should know about. Okay, so once you've done that, the next thing, which is a little bit harder to do, is to electrify your home, because many of us have lots of things in our homes that burn fossil fuels. And every one of them has a counterpart in the world of electric devices that operates better and dramatically lowers carbon emissions. We saw almost a quarter of you had already installed a heat pump water heater, which is fantastic. Most people don't know what they are, but this is the lowest carbon way to heat water. Then space heating with heat pumps, and also comes with cooling, induction cooking to replace our smelly and polluting gas stoves, and they also work better and they're easier to clean. Electric fireplaces and heat pump dryers, and even things like electric tools for our yard care and for barbecuing. All these things have this amazing ability to keep our homes the way we want them and reduce our carbon emissions. I'll talk a little bit about heat pump water heaters. They look pretty much like regular water heaters, but they have a heat pump sitting on top of the storage tank, which harvests air warmth from the air around it. They work basically like a refrigerator does, but in reverse. So your refrigerator is a heat pump that's pumping the heat from inside your refrigerator into your kitchen, which makes your kitchen slightly warmer. In this case, it's the opposite. This is pumping the heat from your room and compressing and turning that into hot water, essentially by compressing the refrigerants, etc., to elevate the temperatures. So it's best to put these in a garage, or a basement is a great place because they'll also dehumidify, or a large utility closet is a good place to do this. You don't want it right next to you because it's going to put out some cool air, but as long as it's in a place that's not going to bother you that way, these things are incredibly quiet and energy efficient. And you can see from the cost of operations here that compared to electric storage or gas tankless, they're dramatically lower in terms of their cost to operate. All the major manufacturers are making these things now, and they have been doing this for over 10 years. So they're on their second or third, or in some cases, fourth generation of these products. They come with 10-year warranties, which should be a signal to us. It is a signal to us that they believe in this technology, because an electric water heater, a gas water heater will come with a 6-year warranty. So it's the lowest cost way to heat water. It's also the lowest carbon way to heat water. You know, this is, again, just with regular old electricity right out of your wall, and without doing anything, without doing those things we just talked about. But of course, if you've got renewable energy, then your heat pump would be creating 0 carbon emissions. The same thing is possible for heating our spaces, which makes more comfortable spaces and cleaner air. They come in 2 basic varieties. The ducted systems, which are connected to your where you basically replace your furnace and would blow warm air through your ducts, so you get warm air coming out in every room. And they have this external unit, which is harvesting the heat from the outside world and concentrating that into your home. Because these things blow air more continually than a gas furnace does, which is incredibly hot, so it goes on and then on and off and on and off and on and off. These things operate more continually at lower temperatures. That means more air movement through your home, more air movement through your filters, which means cleaner indoor air. And it's more consistent indoor air temperatures for the most part. So every part of your room is staying warm versus just the place next to the vents. They also come in these ductless varieties, which are great for homes that have baseboard heat, or maybe you've got a hard to heat room that isn't well served by your ducts. You can combine these systems. So these are the 2 basic things that you need to know about if you're thinking about one in your home. You know, we have a ductless system up there on the wall in the room where I am, and these things are incredible for both heating and cooling. All the major manufacturers are making these things, and they have been for decades. In some countries, that's all that's available, because natural gas, like in Japan, for example, they don't have natural gas. So they've been doing this for decades. And much of the leading technology comes from Japan and is now being incorporated into the American-made models. But you can see when you compare the cost of operation to these other things that we're familiar with, you know, on the East Coast, there's still quite a bit of oil. Furnaces still around, unfortunately. Electric baseboard is common all over the United States, and it's one of the most expensive ways to heat our homes, which is why gas furnaces have been attractive. But heat pumps are going to be comparable. In the worst case scenario, they're comparable to heating your home with gas. And in most cases, they're going to save you a few $100s a year. And if you're going with ductless, which are the most efficient ones, they can save you several $100s a year compared to gas furnaces. And again, the carbon emissions are dramatically lower. And this will vary depending on how clean your grid is around the country. But everywhere I've done this calculation, it's cleaner. This is the average in the United States. Here in Oregon, it's a much, we have a relatively clean grid here. And so the carbon emissions are even more dramatic than this, the reductions for heat pumps. But anywhere in the United States, you're going to reduce your carbon emissions. Okay, so those are the two big ones in terms of our homes, but there are other ones that are really important to talk about. And part of it is because, you know, while we don't really have an emotional attachment to our furnaces and our water heaters, a lot of people have strong feelings about cooking and how to cook, and gas has been recognized as the kind of the best way to cook for a long time. I was one of those people who thought that there was nothing better than that. But once I experienced induction cooking, you know, I would never go back. And I'm sure many of you on the call here have as well. You might just put your experiences in. When I ask this question in person, like how many people have converted to an induction stove or have an induction stove in their house, and I get a raise of hands and say, how many of you would ever go back to gas? You know, nobody would ever go back to gas after they've experienced induction. You get much better temperature control, way faster to heat and cool, easier to clean, and a lot safer, which is really important if we have kids in our homes, or worried about just maybe causing fires, which I've done personally in our own home. But now that we have even better information about the pollutants that come from gas stoves, there's even more reason to be excited about induction. This is what the American Medical Association is saying about the indoor air pollution increases caused from gas stoves. And this risk of childhood asthma is not a minor additional risk. Kids who live in homes that have gas stoves are 42% more likely to incur or to have asthma or the effects of asthma, which is not insignificant. Now we know also from our friends at Stanford who are doing this research that even a single gas burner can create indoor air pollution, which would be similar to secondhand tobacco smoke. In particular, it's the benzene that is in burned methane that is a serious carcinogen. There's no known safe exposure level to benzene. So basically, cooking with a gas stove is essentially like smoking in your house. And then we also know now that even if you've got a hood in your home, which hopefully you're using, they're the best we can do, but they won't eliminate all the pollution from gas stoves. And in the time it takes you to cook an egg, you've probably got indoor air quality that would be illegal if it was happening outside. All right, so back to the safety thing. This is one of the amazing things about induction, where they heat the pots, but they don't heat the surface. So you can see the surface is staying cool to the touch, and the chocolate isn't melting. This burner is on, and it's heating the pot, which is melting the chocolate in that one area. And that's why if you take the pot off the surface will be warm, but it won't be hot. You won't be able to burn yourself from that. And if you spill anything onto the surface, it's a sponge to wipe it up. It's really easy. Or damp cloth, and you've got a clean surface. This is a study from Frontier Energy in California that compared induction to electric resistance in natural gas for lots of different dimensions. This is just time to boil 8 quarts of water, which is a lot of water. But you know, if you're making a big pot of pasta or something for your family, you can see that you'll be able to boil that water in half the time with induction, compared to even a really big, beefy gas burner. So lots of reasons to be excited about this. If you're not sure and you want to just try something out, I highly recommend these induction hot plates, which you can get for under $100. Some of them as low as $60. And you just plug it in to 120 volts. It can sit right on your countertop. You can try it out for yourself, see what it's like. You can, if you like it, you can use your gas stove less. A lot of people I know just put this right on their gas stove. and this reduces the amount of gas they use in their homes, and it reduces that exposure to all those chemicals we were just talking about. And then when the time is right, you can replace your stove altogether. Okay, so all these things work better than their gas counterparts. Your refrigerator, your water heater, your heat pump, your stove, even your barbecue, your gas tools, gas fireplace sensors, all these things work better than their gas counterparts, which means we can eliminate gas in our homes. We'll have homes that work better, superior indoor air quality, lower operating expenses, much easier maintenance. And all these things combined, you know, you're talking about 5 to 11 tons of carbon emissions you're avoiding by doing these things. Okay, so if you're not sure how to start, because this can feel daunting, one of the things that I highly recommend is people get a home energy audit. There are people out there who can come to your home and look at your ducts and your insulation and your windows and your doors. They'll look at your electric panel and they'll look at your equipment, and they'll give you a really good idea about what you might want to think about doing in your home, how much it might cost. They can give you recommendations about incentives that are available and give you a really clear picture about what it would look like for your home to electrify it, particularly if you talk to them and say, hey, I'm thinking about an EV. That's a good piece of information when they're looking at your electric panel to know whether you might need to do some work there. So this is a great way to get like a good base level information. It can cost a couple $100 typically. It'll vary. There's some places that will do it for less than that. You can get a tax credit for some of that, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it's highly worth doing, and it'll give you an idea about what you need to do. You still might need to make some decisions for yourself about what you care most about. Like you might be really concerned about indoor air quality, for example, in which case the induction stove might be a good place to start. That's a decision you can make on your own. Okay, let's talk about transportation for a minute. I think most people are aware of electric vehicles. It's hard not to be. There's lots of them out there. Some of our friends have them. Some of the people on this call have them. It's clear that they're more fun to drive. Everyone who's got one will tell you that. But a lot of people don't have a real appreciation for how dramatically they lower operating costs, which we'll talk about. And who wants to go to a gas station when you can charge from home? And these things require very little maintenance. The comparison I love is this one between the Hyundai Kona, which is a nice little SUV. They make a gas version of it. It gets pretty decent mileage, but they make an electric version of the exact same car. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference except for the drivetrain. And you can see on average here how much farther you can go for $10 of electricity with the electric car than $10 of the gas with the gas car. And if you live in someplace like California or New York where gas is really expensive, this is the national average gas, which is $3.37. I haven't seen gas in the $3 range for seems like 10 years here in Oregon. It's been well over $4, close to $5 most of the time, and it's over $5 in a lot of places. In which case, this comparison would get even more dramatic. But needless to say, somewhere between 3 and 5 or 6 times more miles for the money with an electric vehicle, and of course, dramatically reduced carbon emissions. So it's really hard to argue with these cars. They have this sticker price shock value, which you will see. And again, this is the same comparison of these two cars, $10,000 more for the EV. Although I can say, I've been doing this comparison for about 4 years. And in that time, the Kona gas car has more expensive than it was by about $2,000 or $3,000. The EV price has come down by about $2,000 or $3,000. So now, I mean, they're getting closer to parity, but they're not parity yet. That's why the federal tax credit is so important, because with that tax credit, these things become closer to parity. Many states have up to $2,000 or $2,500 of a tax credit on top of this, which essentially eliminates the price difference between electric cars and gas cars. And then when you look at the cost of operation over 5 years, that fuel savings cost that we just showed, you know, a third of the expense in terms of fuel savings and very little maintenance. This is from AAA, because basically you need new windshield wipers and new tires with an EV. That's it. So now you can see over 5 years, you're saving $3,000. In California, it's closer to $6,000. Here in Oregon, it's about $5,000. So it's going to depend a little state by state, but on average, $3,000 over 5 years. So these things are a really good deal. You just have to get over the sort of sticker shock. A lot of people ask me about the batteries and what about manufacturing the batteries? Isn't that bad for the environment? Does that outweigh the benefits that you get from the operation? Here's a study from the Union of Concerned Scientists, which shows that to produce one gas car, it takes about 7 tons of carbon emissions. That's a mid-sized car. But you operate it for 13 years, which is the average life expectancy. It's total of 84 tons. An EV, it takes more carbon to produce it, 12 versus 7. But because the emissions from operating are so much lower, you're talking about less than half, way less than half over its lifetime. And if you're doing what we recommend, what people should be doing, what the whole world will be doing soon, because that's where we're going, it's a really dramatic comparison because the operating emissions go to 0. So you can see that even when we consider the batteries, it's way better proposition to go with an EV than to stay with your gas car, which is another reason why you should be getting rid of your gas car as soon as you can. There's no reason to wait. Okay. There are incentives at the state level. Some of them are really juicy, but these are the ones that's hard to summarize. These are the ones that are available from the federal IRA. It was just passed. These are tax credits, $2,000 for a heat pump water heater or a heat pump. Currently, there's no incentives for induction stoves or heat pump dryers on the tax credit side. We will be seeing the rebate program, which will start to roll out about middle of next year is the estimates that we see. It'll vary from state to state, but the soonest I think we'll see that is probably middle of the year next year. There are rebates for induction stoves and heat pump dryers. They're income qualified, so that will depend on your income level, but there's definitely cost savings there. We saw that national $7,500 for an EV. And by the way, you know, this can seem complicated because some cars get it, some cars don't. If you decide to lease your car, every car gets that $7,500 reduction as long as you're not buying the really expensive luxury models. Like I said, you can get some money for energy audits and for weatherization. A lot of states have really good money for weatherization, probably twice this. If you look at state incentives, there's money for wiring in your panels and solar and storage. Like when I look at these numbers in Oregon, they're roughly double what I'm showing here, but that varies dramatically from state to state. So in California, we were just talking with Bob earlier, you can get a heat pump water heater pretty much for free if you stack all the incentives that are available there right now. So it varies a lot from state to state. Okay, I like to show this slide to people because all these things feel new to us. They feel like, wow, some of us didn't even know what these things were just a few months ago, or maybe not before tonight. You hadn't heard of these things. It can feel like, wow, I'm on the leading edge. Am I going to be the first one on my block doing this? This is some data from the industry, the shipment data for heat pumps and gas furnaces. I track this really closely. And you can see in 2018, we were a country that was buying mostly gas furnaces and a few heat pumps. That's completely shifted. Now in 2022, it's the majority heat pumps. And in 2023, it's looking like 60-40% in terms of heat pumps versus gas furnaces. So despite what the New York Times is saying about heat pumps slowing down, that's just noise. The truth is Americans are adopting these things at great rates because people are seeing that these things are better. This is a dramatic turnaround in terms of market share in just 4 years. Similar thing is happening with EVs. We're expected to go over 1 million new EVs sold in the United States this year for the first time, which is 8% of total auto sales. Of course, this is dramatically different from state to state. In California, it's close to 30% or over 30%, I believe. Here in Oregon, it's 17%. In some states, it's closer to 4%. So it's going to be all over the place. But as a national average, it's 8%, which is pretty striking in terms of the change from just a few years ago. And all of us can help to make those things happen faster, which is why I like to talk about this Electrify Everyone. You know,
Brian, can I stop you just real quickly?
Yeah.
If you could take about 4 or 5 more minutes, we'd like to get to the breakout room. What you've said is so powerful. We could listen all night. We'd also like to listen to what folks here in the audience would like to.
Yeah, we're just about to wrap up here.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I like to end on this idea of electrifying everyone because, you know, I think a lot of us have this idea of taking care of our personal responsibility for our own carbon emissions, which is great. But we need to be thinking about how we rapidly accelerate the whole country and the whole world to these solutions. And all of us have an important role to play, partly because when we do these things, our friends and neighbors see it and they say, oh, that looks like a good thing to do, which isn't really important. But it's also important that we use our voice and our charity, any mechanism we have to help accelerate this. So make sure you're talking to your friends and family about this. We're heading into the holiday season. This is a perfect time to talk about this. I think what you'll find is most people will be interested to hear what you have to say. Most people are worried about these same things that you and I are worried about. Most people are looking for answers and they don't know what they are. So talk to your friends and family about these things, spread the word. That's a really important role that all of us play. There are charities all over the country that do this free work for low-income families. There are a couple that we work with here in Oregon that are fantastic. Consider donating some money to these charities that electrify low-income communities. Really helpful. And then, of course, support policy and lawmakers that see that this is better and are advocating for this. Not the ones who are kind of like, well, we'll see what happens. No, you want to be voting for the people who are pushing for this change. And that makes a huge difference. I'm going to end with just a few resources. I'm going to put these links in the chat. But Rewiring America has a lot of good information. There's a fact sheet from the IRS on the IRA. I'll give you links for Arcadia and Common Energy, two great places to look to see if community solar is available in your state. There is this database of statewide incentives that you can use to find incentives in your state. Your local utilities are another place to look, and there's usually an energy efficiency organization that runs at the state level you might check as well. And then, of course, our website, which is organized in a way to try to make it easy. If you go to our Take Action page, this is what it looks like, where there's information on how to do each one of these things step by step. And of course, if you're interested, please sign up for our monthly newsletter, where we'll give you some fun and interesting information to help you on your journey. And that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Brian, thank you. Thank you. If this were an audience, a live audience, we'd all be applauding right now. So let's maybe raise hands and thank Brian for his fabulous presentation. One of the things we'd like to do moving forward is to find out what you are looking for, you in the audience. And so we're going to break up into groups, and each group will have a facilitator. Jen Chandler, you'll see there on the top of the screen, would be doing that. We are going to ask everyone to operate in a spirit of collaboration with these questions. What motivates you to electrify? What challenges do you face? And what more would you like to learn? And you'll break up into groups. You'll have a facilitator. I think Jen is going to actually put the facilitation rules into the chat. They're no secret. We just want to work together to see where we can go from here. Thank you all. We had some great discussion in our group. How long do you think the poll will take, Jen?
Just a couple of minutes. Do you want me to go ahead and launch it?
Why don't you do that now that all this is fresh in people's minds, and then we'll have maybe some report outs and have some people talk about what they've learned. Leslie, did you have your hand up, Leslie?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. And the poll question is, what support would be helpful from ECA? A few different options there.
Oh, so we picked it one. Okay, got it.
Oh, just pick one.
Oh,
You should be able to pick more than one. Is it only allowing you to pick one?
Only
I think
allowing
we
one.
did more than one, but pick your favorite, and hopefully enough people have different favorites.
Thank
My
you.
apologies. It was meant to let you select more than one.
No worries.
So it looks like the majority of you said workshops on specific electrification related topics. So looks like people are really wanting to learn more about specifics. Closely followed by resources with practical information on our website. Workshops to help you assist your community in accessing inflation reduction benefits to electrify, followed by an electrification group. We're going to drop a link in the chat in just a minute about an interest in electrification group. So if you are interested in joining a group to discuss electrifying your home, or you've already electrified and you're interested in sharing your knowledge with others, we are gauging interest and thinking about possibly starting maybe a monthly meeting in 2024. So we're going to drop a link in the chat, and please complete that interest form if you are interested in joining such a group. I'm going to go ahead and stop share here.
Well, thank you, Jen. That was a really good survey. It kind of goes along with what a lot of us have been thinking. I want to take a few minutes to have a little bit of report out, and then after about 3 or 4 minutes, maybe we will turn it back over to Francis or Leslie, who wants to take us up. So, Debbie, were you a facilitator?
Yes, but Ricky and Doug have been taking the notes, so maybe they should report out.
Muted,
Sorry,
Ricky.
you're muted, Ricky.
I know, I was unmuted and then muted. The range of our motivation, one of us had a daughter with asthma and thought it would be a good idea to clean up the air. We personally said it made us feel less guilty. And some people said it's my duty to do whatever I can. Was very influenced by Limits to Growth, the book. And another said her grandchildren's fears, wanted to address that. So should I just go through all the questions or not?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. The obstacles, pretty universally, it's cost. Questions about cost and complexity. One of the obstacles was too much shade on the roof, practical things like that. And Debbie had the idea to help her son put solar panels on his roof instead, because his roof was way better. Let's see.
One more, Ricky.
Yep. We wanted to know about taxes, actual costs, small water heaters, the effect of putting the ducts in the house versus outside.
Great stuff. Mike Allen has his hand up, and then somebody else want to raise their hand, or you want to go next?
Well, I just wanted to mention that we had a nice mix. One of us lives in urban Manhattan in a co-op. I live in a manufactured home on the coast of Oregon with all electric, but trying to figure out how to benefit from the all these types of efficient devices that we can put in. And the other one lived in a rural home that's old. And the question is, do I invest in all this stuff, or do I wait until I retire and move out and get a brand new home? But the biggest thing that came out of it is that we all need education at all levels. We need, I encourage them to stay with our ongoing webinars that we'll probably be creating as a result of this meeting. I'll leave it at that for now, but it was an interesting mix, not especially when we heard from somebody that doesn't own their own home.
Yeah. Okay, Terry, and then David, and Roger, and then Jamie. And I think that will be the end of our time.
Our group, all of us agreed that the motivation was climate change and getting rid of fossil fuels. There was a lot of concerns about, first of all, again, being in an older home, and when do you replace a car with a electric car? Because the concern also of disposing of the batteries, they've heard that it's very difficult and it's polluting. The other thing is getting competent installers. How do you find that? And the other thing is how to get correct information, because people hear a lot of things that, oh, that's not really going to cool as much as it says it's going to be, or you can't go on long trips with a electric vehicle. You can't find stations. So getting accurate information and resources.
Great, dear. By the way, I say dear because she and I have been married for 53 years. Okay, Dave, and then Roger, and then Jamie, Now, we're probably going to run over, which I guess is okay. We'll just keep going. Is that all right, Jen and Francis and Leslie? You okay with running over?
Maybe just by a minute or two, but let's try to keep pretty close to respecting people's time.
Okay, so sorry, David, just a minute and same, and then Roger.
I didn't hear any conversation around nuclear power. I want to encourage this group to look into it and to have a program somewhere along the line about the advantages of nuclear power, especially modern technology, modern small scale systems that can replace the gas powered peaking plants.
Okay, I'm sure that'll be something we will cover in future seminars. Thank you.
I'll quickly go. I just had two folks in my group had interesting discussion. Again, it was about climate change was a major motivation, and also the polluting aspects of natural gas. Challenges, of course, high cost, but also aesthetics in terms of running cords up into your rooms to put in mini splits. And another challenge is not adequate charging infrastructure, and you can't run cords across the sidewalk where this person lives. Range anxiety for vehicles, and also concern about reliability of the grid. You electrify everything, the grid goes down, everything goes down. And some learning about a little bit some of the details about how to make mini splits really work in a house. Those are some of the concerns.
Great, Jamie.
I don't think we really went into motivation, but I think it was, I would say, climate change. We had a range of people from all electric houses with a longstanding heat pump with great success to a new heat pump. But my challenges, some of the challenges is a multi-unit residence condos, 9 stories. That's all got natural gas infrastructure, and we don't even have individual electric meters. So that's going to be a big challenge where it has to be done through the board. But one person said they wanted to know more about backup battery supply. So that would be something.
Great. Seth, I think you may be the last one.
Sure. We didn't talk much about motivations, although grandchildren were mentioned as being one person's motivation. We did talk about the fact that some of our participants were early adapters, and so they were looking at a new generation of technology and whether it made sense to try to update their older systems. It might be solar panels or other things. There were some concerns about heat pumps that were expressed. One being whether it would be as comfortable, especially given that mini splits are usually at the tops of rooms, whereas heat rises and it might be difficult to get the heat down where it's needed. Another question of just about whether compressors were required outdoors and indoors for heat pumps, and concern that might be the case. I would say that that there were a few places where people needed more technical information, which some of our members were able to provide, but would really probably could benefit from a follow-up group that got into more specifics and had area experts.
Great. Well, thank you all for your comments. Thank you all for attending today. I'm going to turn and thank Brian and Stewart big time for all he's done. Francis, I'm going to turn it back to you or Leslie.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Robert. And thank you, Brian, for a great presentation. I wish we had more time. We'll have some follow-up things in the new year. And even before the new year, next month, we're going to have a chef helping us learn about induction cooking in the holiday setting. So we're really looking forward to that. We'll send you the details once we have them. And thank you all so much for coming. And please stay tuned for more information and more opportunities to come. And good night.
Wonder whether we could unmute and say thank you again to Brian. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you,
Brian.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
It was
Take
great.
care,
Thank
everyone.
you.